1963.
Poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody.
I grew up knowing that he was in the struggle to give us a better life, and that I was experiencing a better life because of this man.
1972.
Brothers and sisters, what time is it? It's nation time.
He just had a way. He mixed politics, the political aspect of the speech with the spiritual aspect of it, and he had a cadence, just like Dr. King, and it just drew people in.
1988.
Call you outcast, low down, you can't make it, you're nothing, you're from nobody, subclass, underclass. I was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me.
When someone else passes away or so forth, then someone else needs to pick up.
A civil rights icon, two-time presidential candidate, and Baptist minister.
He was very humble in the sense that he always referred to himself as a country preacher, but he was so much more than that.
Reverend Jesse Jackson died Tuesday, February 17th, at the age of 84. This week on the Crossroads Suncast, we're looking at Jackson's life, legacy, and his work organizing in our region. I'm Bryce Patterson.
And hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep
1941.
He was born in the Jim Crow South. He was born in poverty. He would tell you himself that society would not have given him a chance to have become successful. But he had the grit and determination to make it through college, to make it to seminary, during segregation, during Jim Crow, when all of his rights as a citizen were not in place.
That's Murray State history professor Brian Clardy. Born to an unmarried teen mom, Jackson started working with Martin Luther King Jr.'s Southern Christian Leadership Conference in the 1960s, while attending divinity school in Chicago.
He left seminary to join Operation Breadbasket, and he was more or less on the economic side of the civil rights movement insofar as jobs, contracts, and boycotting those businesses that did not cater to people of color and did not hire people of color and so forth.
In part, he's a compelling leader because he's a strong public speaker.
He was adroit in the use of poetry and prophetic imagination, as Walter Brueggemann would say. This idea, you can be born in the slum, but the slum doesn't have to be born in you. Up with hope, down with dope. Those type of rhymes, that was what he was known for.
Here's president and co-founder of the Alexander and Pulaski County NAACP, Tyrone Coleman.
I had an opportunity to meet Reverend Jackson at a mayor's conference in D.C., and I was taken aback by just his whole physical physique. I didn't realize he was as tall as he was and just a big guy, and that was just amazing to see this person in person.
I marched with him a couple of times on different things and with Rainbow Push, and I met him at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Pastors Conference in 2004 in Atlanta. He was a very gregarious character, full of life and energy. He was very free-spirited, a man who privileged love, compassion, and unity among people. Now, he could be very contentious. Don't get me wrong. He had that bite in him, but he also tempered it with restraint at different points in time. And that's what made him a very important figure.
He was just like one of those individuals crying from the wilderness.
Dr. Clardy says Reverend Jackson was unique for his time.
He had a whole lot of strong views on issues that were controversial at their time, which have now become mainstream. He was an advocate for Palestinian rights, LGBTQ rights when that was not popular in the 1970s and 80s. He was a man who was really ahead of his time, but he paved the way for so many different people.
1968.
So I was coming across the stairway, across the courtyard, and he said, "Jesse, you're late. Doc, you know you're late. The easy turns. That's the doc. Yeah, power. But I remember Reverend Abernathy coming saying, back up. This is my dearest friend, Martin. You can't give up. Don't leave us. Don't leave us now.
He was there in Memphis when Martin Luther King had been shot, and it really changed him. He became a little bit more strident. He spoke at the 1972 Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana.
But now we find ourselves with the right to move in any neighborhood in America, and we can't pay the note. We have the right to go to any school in America. We can't pay the tuition.
Jackson ends up in conflict with other leaders at the SCLC in the wake of King's assassination and leaves the organization. He builds Operation Push, an organization that leads economic boycotts. Later, he merged that organization with the National Rainbow Coalition. Over time, Dr. Clardy says Reverend Jackson built a broad coalition in Chicago and organized for voter registration in the city. 1969.
Well, it was back, during that time when blacks were more left out of opportunity. And we had a local person that grew in stature, Reverend Dr. Charles Corn, and he was able to bring in people like a Jesse Jackson, a John Lewis, and all, and helped with bringing about jobs at the local level as well as the state level.
Tyrone Coleman grew up in Cairo, Illinois. He describes a city of contrasts early in his life.
On this side of town, where I live now, growing up, you couldn't come on this side of town, basically, unless you were a butler, maid, took care of lawn work or something like that. We lived on the other side of the east side of town. But at the same time, there were black businesses. People were able to send their kids off to colleges. Like I say, it was like everything was here. People came to Cairo to shop for medical issues and all those, for entertainment and all of that.
The civil rights era in Cairo was marked by violence, including arson, exchanges of gunfire, and bombings.
One particular incident during the course of a march where a person that literally was being beaten with a bat. I've thought about that over the years. I actually saw that take place. I can't remember how it affected me then, but I can imagine how it did though. And growing up, I never thought, to a certain extent anyway, I guess that's some of the reasons why some of the decisions I made catapulted me into wanting to become a part of a civil rights organization.
An article in Chicago's West Side Torch newspaper highlights his time in the city. Quote, "The black leaders toured Pyramid Court and other areas in Cairo to reassure black people there that other people cared and were concerned about the destruction and intimidation of black people in the Illinois River town." Jackson challenged the city's chief of police to demand an investigation of the violence and to work to increase the number of black police officers. Jackson is quoted calling on Illinois Governor Richard Ogilvie to, quote, "protect the most basic right of all in Cairo, the right to live." That month, the governor sent 70 state policemen to the city. An issue of the Southern Illinoisan, dated June 27, 1969, says the curfew has been reimposed in Cairo after competing protests, quote, "squared off on opposite sides of a street and hurled bricks, bottles, rocks, and jeers at one another." Coleman has a long history of activism and organizing in Cairo, including 2 terms as the city's mayor, from 2011 to 2019. He was a college student at the time of Jackson's visits to the city.
Every time I would come home, I was in school, and when I would come home, he would already been here and gone out. Same thing with John Lewis and Julian Bond and all those guys that were here.
The memories of that era have driven a lifetime of civic engagement from Coleman, and he's excited to talk about how much he loves his hometown.
I don't think you could go anywhere in this country and find any friendlier people than here in Cairo.
Reverend Jackson returned to the city in 1996 as part of a broader tour of the region, speaking to students at Cairo High School. He also gave an address at Southern Illinois University, calling on students to push for federal investment in higher education and better job opportunities. Jackson's advocacy stretches beyond the borders of the United States. In late 1983, Robert Goodman, a U.S. Navy pilot, is shot down over Lebanon and taken captive in Syria.
Jesse Jackson goes to Damascus, and I don't know how he managed to get Assad to release him, but he did. And so that showed Jesse Jackson's skill, not just as a civil rights leader, but also as a diplomat.
It's one of several hostage negotiations where Jackson is able to secure the release of Americans abroad.
People began to see Jackson in a new light in the 1980s, that maybe he should seek higher office, maybe even the presidency. And so everywhere he went, he kept hearing the call, "Run, Jesse, run." So in 1983, he makes the announcement for the presidency.
Reverend Jackson is considered a long shot at the time, but he starts building up support. During his primary campaign, the Washington Post releases an article where Jackson uses a slur for Jewish New Yorkers. Jackson initially denies those remarks, then apologizes. Dr. Clardy says, running for president allows Jackson to shape the Democratic Party's platform, even though he doesn't end up getting the nomination. At the same time, Reverend Jackson makes his first appearance on Saturday Night Live.
One of the reasons I'm glad to be in addition to being with you is that this program employs so many black people, gives so many black people a chance.
If you don't remember the sketch, his monologue is interrupted by that buzzing noise, and the all-white staff of the control room switches out for a black staff before Jackson can walk in. He returned to SNL in 1991, reading in his iconic pastor's style.
I read from Sam I Am. According to the Latter-day Saint Seuss.
You do not like green eggs and ham?
I do not like them. Sam I Am.
1984 was only Jackson's first run for the presidency.
He tried again in 1988, and he was a little bit more successful in the sense that he ends up in second place behind Michael Dukakis in the 88 presidential nomination race. He beat out a lot of mainstream candidates in those primaries, people like Al Gore and Richard Gephardt.
Here's Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders reflecting on that run in 1988.
He has put his life on the line, fighting not only for the legal rights, the moral rights of black people, but of all working people. This guy has had the guts to be where the action is.
In the 90s, he served as a shadow delegate and shadow senator for Washington, D.C. President Bill Clinton and Secretary of State Madeleine Albright appointed Reverend Jackson as Special Envoy of the President and Secretary of State for the Promotion of Democracy in Africa in 1997. 3 years later, Clinton presented him the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his work negotiating the release of U.S. soldiers held in Yugoslavia. His sons Jesse Jackson Jr. and Jonathan Jackson won seats in Congress in 1995 and 2023. Later in life, Jackson organized as part of the Black Lives Matter movement, calling for justice for Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor. He stepped down as head of Rainbow Push in 2023. His body will lie in state at the organization's headquarters, with a final church service and celebration of his life set for February 28th. 2026. Here's Betty Dobson with the Hotel Metropolitan in Paducah.
There will never be another Jesse Jackson. Just like I guess there won't be another Dr. Martin Luther King. These people were they were selfless. They were concerned for others, the well-being, and they knew that their lives were on the line, and they put that to the side to make sure that we could have something better, to strive for something better.
Benny Hetty with the Paducah McCracken County NAACP says, Jackson was a unique figure, but the work goes on.
He run the PUSH organization, and that was to help poor people. Basically what it was, and a lot of times we have to look up and realize that even the Bible tells us that the poor will be with us always. So therefore, there's going to be a work there from here on out. And when someone else, can't do it anymore or passes away or something, it's just giving us a message that, hey, you need to pick up and go on to and keep this going.
In a time of division and unrest, Tyrone Coleman says the loss of Jackson's voice is especially noticeable.
That strong voice for the people is absent. And I just wonder what difference it would make if he was still in that mode of physical strength, mental strength, and all of that. What dynamics would that have played in where we're at now? And I think it would be a little bit better, to use that word, than what it is now, really, because his voice was dominant, and not just in pursuing life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for blacks, but for just people in general.
Here's Dr. Clardy.
And I think what Reverend Jackson has done, along with people like Cesar Chavez and others, they left us a blueprint for advocacy in this moment. They left us a map to go about in order to make that day come when the beloved community would become a reality. And, he was more than just a country preacher, in my view. He was an organic intellectual and activist and theologian in his own right, but a very practical. He wasn't like a booky, nerdy theologian, but he was more pragmatic. And that's the person that we miss today. But there's so many Jesse Jacksons who are coming in behind him, of all stripes, of all races, of genders, of non-binary people, people of different religious persuasions, people who looked at the way that he designed those campaigns in the 1980s, and before that with his activism in the 60s and 70s, who now know they're taking their cues from this man. And those are going to be the folks and those generations coming up behind us that are going to be the ones that are going to make the difference. And I think that Reverend Jackson will sometimes look down and see the things that people are doing. And I think he'll be very pleased that his work was not in vain.
Video and sound for this episode by Mason Watkins, Jason Thomason, Morgan Regal, and Ethan Patterson. Thank you for listening.